want to go out and like really, really, really do something.
I say it, I say it again. You've been had. You've been took. You've been hoodwinked. Bamboozled.
It's a celebration, fellas. Salute.
Always do the right thing.
That's it?
That's it.
I got it. I'm gone. The way of the future. The way of the future. The way of the future.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in to Duel of the Greats podcast, folks. The way of the future is here and now, because we have that is now this week will be all of the opening credit segments now that we have at least discussed, and we still have more weeks to go. But not to get too ahead of ourselves, this week is our biopic week, folks. Big week here on the podcast. Okay, Martin Scorsese is The Aviator, about the life and times of Howard Hughes, and Spike Lee's Malcolm X, about the civil rights leader from the 40s, 50s, 60s. These are a couple really good, very epic, very long movies. Over 6 hours worth of content here, of movie content to watch. We're not going to have a 6-hour podcast, so but those will be what we're talking about this week. Maybe these are two of the better films for both these directors. So this is going to be a tight one this week, I feel, personally. And to get us into talking about this, the man who likes to talk about tight ones more than anything. Who am I going to talk about? I don't know.
Where are we going with this podcast?
I don't even know where I was going with that. But Nate, why don't you go ahead and lead us off this week? So we want to talk about, well, you pick. You talk about Malcolm X or The Aviator first. Which one?
I never remember from the week before. You always kick it to me and you're like, you pick. And I'm always like, well, we should do it the opposite of the week we did it before. And I can never remember what we did the week before. So I think what I'll do is I'll probably start with Malcolm X this week. I'm the Spike Lee guy anyway. And I will be honest, I had never seen this movie all the way through. It is a very long movie. It's 3 hours and 20 minutes. And there were
Some say you're still watching it.
Yeah, some may say I'm still out there watching it. I did remember seeing the ending. I couldn't recall if I'd seen this movie, but I didn't really remember. And I'd seen a lot of the ending. I had not seen or been exposed to any of the early parts of the movie. And something I think is really interesting about this movie is this really sets the tone, I think, for a lot of modern biopics that are made by major American filmmakers. I think it's really, really hard to try to encompass an entire person's life into a movie, which is why a lot of filmmakers won't do that. They will just pick specific parts of a person's life. But Malcolm X, obviously, it's a long movie and it really goes for everything. You see the entire scope of his life. You see his early life, kind of leading a life of crime, and he's kind of lost. You see this whole conversion to Islam in prison. You see how his own beliefs about race relations kind of evolve, and I think it's really powerful for this movie to show the whole scope of his life instead of picking specific points, because the evolution of who Malcolm X was, it to fully appreciate it, you have to understand every single thing that happened to him and where he came from. And I'll be honest, watching the whole thing over for the first time, watching it from beginning to end for the first time, the opening scenes, which have this beautiful, like the cinematography of this movie is great, have this really beautiful kind of orange hue to them, really takes you sort of back into the past. I even have this note that there's this scene where they're in these clubs and everyone's dancing, and I just think, I said no one does groups of people dancing better than Spike Lee. That's something that we've seen a lot this season and is really good in this movie. But I'll be honest, when I was watching those opening scenes, I was like, this seems superfluous. Like this seems like you do not need this to be talking about Malcolm X. And not that I'm in any way an expert or a scholar on Malcolm X, but we kind of know a general narrative about who Malcolm X was. And it seemed like that was not needed. It really was, because when you get to the conversion to Islam in prison, and then when you start to see how his views on race relations evolve in his adult life, it it really almost makes you appreciate more where he came from and the kind of life that he led. It was a, an absolutely remarkable American life, and probably one of the most interesting American lives of the 20th century, and certainly a very powerful and fascinating voice. Um, so I think just from a filmmaking perspective, I really liked. So I think one thing that's really interesting. It has the American flag at the very beginning with the Malcolm X voice, and it's kind of this juxtaposition, sort of this callback to Patton, but it's kind of taking that imagery and changing it a little bit. Like I said, it starts with this almost sort of orange amber hue, kind of old Hollywood style when it's depicting his young life, and then it slowly starts to evolve into kind of this colder, bluer tones as the movie goes on. Obviously, I mean, we could sit here and talk all night about Denzel Washington's performance in this movie. It's certainly one of the great biopic performances of all time, and probably one of the great film performances of the 1990s. He has to carry this whole thing. It's a very long movie, and he does a terrific job with it. But I think that's what I appreciated the most was that if he's going to go for the whole life, he needs to make sure that it matters by the time you get to the end of the movie. And to me, that's how the movie became very powerful, and that's how I really came to admire those early scenes because it shows the full evolution of who he was. Steve, what did you think about Malcolm X?
So I wrote something similar in my notes as I was watching this. I thought originally this movie is just so long, but I do feel like it it earned its length, especially in the first kind of 2/3. I felt like we needed to spend that time with him to see and fully appreciate, like you said, fully appreciate the evolution he goes through to become Malcolm X, and later, I don't want to get his entire name wrong when he converts, but when he converts again. Regardless, yeah, I felt it was earned. An interesting thing, though, in our sources here, Spike did not think he was doing this. Spike specifically says in this book, um, talking about doing biopics and filming people's real lives stories. I don't think this is science. You try to make good choices and not bad ones, specifically taking things in or taking things out, leaving things in. But you can't film somebody's life from crib to coffin. So, I mean, he acknowledged that you can't do this full length biopic, but yet that's kind of what we got. I mean, the big thing that Spike thinks that he left out is his Malcolm X's relationship with Martin Luther King, and that's obvious. I mean, that is not in the movie. It's referenced. There are clips of Martin Luther King, and they talk about certain things, but nobody plays Martin Luther King, and that was a specific choice on Spike's part. But this is Spike Lee, I think, doing what he thought was a trimmed down look at Malcolm X's life, and this was a long story. So, I don't know. I have no idea what this movie would have looked like in the version that the studio tried to make him do, like a 2-hour version. It's very interesting how the production of this movie went, but I want to hear Jeff's opinions first on, did the movie earn its length? It sounds like Nate and I both kind of agree generally that, yeah, this movie required that to really understand the character. So, Jeff, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm not as bothered by length of movies as I think either of you are, or most people are. Like, I tend to a lot of the movies that I really like, are longer anyway. So it's not the hugest deal in the world to me, but at the same time, it is just like it's really long. So, I definitely get that aspect. But I do think it was earned. I think maybe they could have trimmed it down. Like, instead of 320, maybe we go to like 3 hours. Like some of the opening scenes. It's funny because the opening scenes, they're in the like really flashy colored suits and everything, and they're walking around and dancing and doing all this stuff in the neighborhood, and there's Spike Lee again, and he's Malcolm's buddy, and I was like, man, Spike Lee just can't help himself. It just keeps putting himself in these movies, and I was like, are we gonna have another Mo Better Blues situation where Spike Lee's character, takes this journey and he's just not going to be able to hang with him from the acting side of things. And thankfully, um, he kind of exited pretty quickly in the movie, his character. And so we didn't have to, wrestle with that and whether or not his performance was up to snuff or not. But it was, yeah, I think it was, earned. And I think what makes something like Malcolm X maybe more difficult to do isn't even so much the length and encompassing it. It's just that the entirety, almost everything that happens to him is, or that kind of shapes who he is, has to be centered around talking. It's not, there's not a ton of, if you were to do a like the movie Rush, right? Like it wasn't quite a biopic, but it was, about James Hunt and Niki Lauda, and like you can have races because they're race car drivers, and so you could have races, and you could convey different messages and different things through the action that's happening on screen and how they're dealing with it. But in this movie, you really can't. It's just there has to be talking. You have to hear what he goes through. You have to hear what people say to him. You have to hear how he internalizes that, and then you have to hear what he says as well. So it's I do agree that it is earned, and it has to be laid out like that. And so I think that's what makes it difficult. And I think it's actually a massive credit to someone like Spike Lee. Even the movie that it's up against, The Aviator, right? Like Howard Hughes, like there's lots of flying planes, and it's still a long movie, but like there's lots of things that sort of break it up that can give you some action. There's a couple, and even any sort of quote unquote action in Malcolm X isn't really, it's not like, oh, this is a great scene. It's people trying to assassinate him, trying to, or he's in the early parts when he's committing crimes and trying to deal with that kind of a thing. But I think that was the biggest hurdle, and I think it's quite amazing that Spike Lee was able to pull it off, and immediately from the start, I was. This is unlike. I mean, I've only seen the movies that we've done from Spike Lee um, so far this season, but even still, I mean, this is by far and away the most epic film that he's done in scope and just in in its completion. I mean, it was not only in the length, but I mean, they had all the old cars, they had the costume designs, they had all this stuff, right? That you would typically probably associate more with a Martin Scorsese movie, and here's Spike Lee doing it, and he pulls it off fantastic. Sometimes it probably. I mean, this was in 1992, so we're looking at.
Yeah, this
Is like,
is early in his career.
yeah, this is roughly like 6 years after he got his start, because She's Gotta Have It was 86. So I mean, this was a really early movie in his career to sort of bite off this much and see if he could chew it, and he absolutely could. And it almost makes you wonder. Now I haven't seen, there's like Miracle, it's Saint Anna or something. I haven't seen that one. That one, it's kind of a war movie thing, so that may have more of an sort of epic feel to it. I'm not certain on that, um, but that was the most impressive thing right off the bat from Malcolm X. And then of course as you go along, the Denzel's performance is so. And I looked up, I was like, man, surely this movie had to be just nominated for a ton of Oscars, right? And it wasn't. Weirdly enough, Denzel was nominated for his performance, and then it got a nomination for costume design, and I'm like, what in the world? And it I think Spike Lee and the Academy have had a bit of a contentious relationship for almost his whole career. So I don't know how much that plays into something like this, or the question of even racism coming up, and whether or not the Academy just tends not to like movies like this for racist reasons. I don't know.
Yeah.
But the fact that, like, if there was a, after Killers of the Flower Moon recently didn't win any Oscars, there was this huge thing like, oh, Martin Scorsese he's the only director to have 3 movies get 10 or more nominations and not win a single award. And you look at something like Malcolm X, like if Martin Scorsese directs that movie, there's no way that movie gets less than like 8 nominations, right? Because I mean, Nate, you mentioned it, the cinematography, etc. And it's not really the point of this show to really talk about how it should have been recognized. But I thought that was interesting when I looked that up. But
I have the Oscar nominations from that year. Um, so Denzel Washington lost Best Actor to Al Pacino for Scent of a Woman.
that was a career award.
Yeah, it's a career award.
Still shouldn't have
but
won, but that was a career award.
but here are the Best Picture nominees for that year. Just speaking about just I mean, if we're just straight up using the word, that there's some racist overtones to this or influences on this. Here they are. So the movie that won Best Picture that year was Unforgiven, the Clint Eastwood Western. The Crying Game, Few Good Men, Howard's End, and Scent of a Woman. I can see Unforgiven, A Few Good Men, and Scent of a Woman getting in there. Howard's End and Crying Game haven't, for me, I don't know,
I have never.
quite left their mark on.
I mean, the only
It's not
one
much of
that
a mark on popular culture. Yeah.
the only one that I would say is Unforgiven. A Few Good Men I could see getting in, but not before Malcolm X, certainly.
Yeah.
Because it, like, I forgot to mention too, this was the first time I'd seen it as well. So yeah, that's I've never seen The Crying Game or Howard's End or anything.
It's
yeah,
interesting that you mentioned. Sorry to step on your toes there. It's interesting you mentioned Unforgiven because it was also a Warner Brothers produced film, or Warner Brothers production. And Malcolm X, I mentioned the production earlier about how Malcolm X was quote unquote troubled. It was originally a Warner Brothers film as well, and Spike specifically in the book, he thought that Unforgiven, the studio kind of dropped support for Malcolm X specifically to push Unforgiven. Now there were a lot of other things involved there. He wanted a much bigger budget. They didn't want to give it to him. There's the Malcolm X, especially in the early '90s. The topic, is sensitive. But that's very interesting that Unforgiven is the one that wound up winning, considering that all that the prior bad juju there with the studio. You gotta wonder, with all the political intrigue and stuff in the Academy, and especially back then,
who the Academy loves, Gene Hackman,
right,
etc.
And I mean, not only is you got to think about just general racism, institutional racism of the Academy, but I mean again, Malcolm X is a very sensitive topic to, I'm sure, early '90s white.
Well, I mean, as we
voters
saw from
of the Academy, right?
Yeah, and as we saw from the movie, even within the Black community, he was divisive as well. So
yeah, and that's one thing. Oh man, I had no understanding of that. I'm ignorant of that coming into this, and I've learned quite a bit just reading about it. Just how much of a in the Black nationalist movement, and the Muslim Brotherhood, or not Muslim Brotherhood, good Lord, Nation of Islam. How much the infighting and all that. It just, there's so much political backstabbing and rivalry. It was crazy.
Well, yeah, and I the only thing I knew, and I remember learning this just back in grade school, that it was essentially they told us the main difference between Martin Luther King and Malcolm X was, Martin Luther King, and these are the simplified grade school terms essentially that I was given, but it was that Martin Luther King basically wanted everybody to get along and to coexist, and Malcolm X was essentially separate but equal. And it was interesting because one of the quotes I wrote down, where I can't remember who he's talking to, but he says, "The only thing I like integrated is my coffee," which was a little humorous. But then when you peel that back and you're like, okay, this is a really really interesting, or I don't know if interesting is the right word, but it's such a different angle on how to approach all this. And there's so much hate and anger that comes from within Malcolm X. And like I was thinking through, as I'm watching, I'm thinking through all this stuff, and I'm like, is this like, what is this? How do you sort of encapsulate that response to what he's dealing with? And I don't know the best sort of way I could think to verbalize it is that it's just the anger and the hatred that he was feeling. I don't know if it's the appropriate response, but it is a valid response to what he and the black community has and are still going through even up through today. So I thought it was the way they depicted it, in how he was going through it and how he was processing it and everything was very fascinating to watch. And Denzel just could not have nailed it any better. But it's such an just an interesting thing where the headlines that we saw and everything growing up, and I shouldn't say headlines, but just the main thing that it was always about Martin Luther
Right,
King.
the super simplistic dichotomy that is taught in elementary school of,
Yeah,
what we were.
Non-violence,
Sure.
everybody's equal. That sort of way that was what we were taught. But
Right.
then sort of seeing it played out like this, and seeing that real and true anger, and it was just kind of crazy where you just so much, especially middle-aged white guy here, of course I don't, it just, and so the more and more, and especially with this season, what's been interesting to see, the more and more that I personally have been confronted with this, it just makes you think more and more. And I think that's kind of the best I could come up with, that even if everything that he did in a response may not have been appropriate, it was all valid, it was all earned because of how he and how the black community has been treated for 400 years, as they say so often in the movie.
I think that what is also very interesting about the movie, and I mean, just think the movie Malcolm X is a person, and then Spike Lee's choice to make this movie and make this about this specific person is, in America, we don't often revere and anoint people who change their mind. A lot of our American heroes are just people that we sort of see as consistent. In fact, I mean, to this day, I think the idea that fundamentally changing your mind about something is almost like in modern American political discourse is seen as a bad thing. It's seen as a
God
negative
forbid you're a
thing.
flip flopper.
God forbid you flip flop on something. And what I think is really brave for Spike Lee to do here, to choose to make this movie about this person, because this is his first, as you said, this is early in his career. So this is his first biopic. This is his first thing where he's taking the life of a real person, and he's chosen this story. And I think that's very powerful and very brave for him as a filmmaker, because Malcolm X is an American that changed his mind. He he was unafraid to say the things that he felt, and then I think even more importantly, he was unafraid to go in front of crowds and say, I was wrong. I should be willing to work with people of other races to help elevate the black community in this country. And I just think that that's an interesting choice, that Spike Lee found his way to this particular American historical figure before he found his way to anything else. Because Jeff, like you said, I mean, everything that he says, even at the beginning of the movie, is very valid. I mean, his his father is effectively murdered by the Ku Klux Klan. There's still a little bit of uncertainty about that, but like that's probably what happened. His father was probably murdered by the Ku Klux Klan, and so to come out of that, I mean, again, just to speak about how remarkable Malcolm X is of a person, to use that and to allow that to motivate your whole life, and then still to come to a place to go on to go on the pilgrimage to Mecca, and to see this universal brotherhood and this sort of universal humankind coming together, and to be able to come back to this country that has really treated your people awful for 400 years, and stuff that you've had a personal experience with, to change your mind and still be able to see some kind of hope in that, is just a really profound message. And I think the movie does a really incredible job of driving that home by the end of it. And that's why I think that whole evolution, like I said, from the beginning to the end, regardless of the length of the movie, was an important story to tell.
I agree, and I think that's maybe why they could sort of lay all the anger and the hate and everything. They could just sort of lay that bare out there because they knew, later on in the movie there is going to be that change. So not only can not only do they know he's going to change, but at the same time, it makes that change more impactful then, because you see truly the brunt of it, of what he's dealing with and what he's going through, and all those prison scenes and everything where he's talking to Baze. What was that guy's name?
Yeah, Baines. It's a
Baines,
created character. Apparently, his conversion to Islam came via his brother, and Spike just kind of created this character to use it as a a literary device. But yeah,
interesting. But yeah, that it was like seeing his shift. There was that scene where they're reading the dictionary and they're looking at different words, and just the definition of the word black versus the definition of the word white. Not black people versus white people, but just the definition of the colors. And you kind of see, as things click in his head of like, okay, this isn't just something where, people are saying racial epithets. Like, this is an institutionalized thing, all the way down to just the very basic tenets of our language is meant to sort of take down an entire group of people. And it's like you hit that realization, and then you combine that with his dad being killed by the KKK, and his everything that he went through with not only getting in trouble with the law, but then getting sentenced, where there were two white women that were part of the main burglary that caused him to go to jail, and they got 2 years, and he got 8 years or 10 years. So just the differing justice systems that they have and everything, and again, you really see why everything sort of played out as it did. And then if I have like one gripe, and I think Steve, you mentioned it, where um, Spike said one of the things that he wished he would have done was spend more time any time on the relationship between Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. And I don't even know if it necessarily had to be that for me, but the once he came back from his pilgrimage and then sort of changed his ways and said, okay, we're willing to help, or willing to take help from anybody, any race, creed, color, whatever, I kind of wanted to see how that played out a little bit more. I mean, I think based on the timeline, I'm guessing he probably just didn't have a ton of time in reality of playing that out before he was assassinated. But that was the one thing where I was like, okay, I want to see how, he leaves, and he tells everyone he's going to this pilgrimage. He's just been kicked out of the Nation of Islam, and so, or I guess parted ways with. I don't know exactly how that all went down, but and so then to see him come back and then introduce this to the people that were still, still following him, and how that would have played out. I think it would have been a little bit more interesting to go in a little deeper into that. It's not the hugest thing in the world, but that's just something where I was like, oh, I wanted to see more of that. Although, that you could have made probably a 4-hour movie if you wanted to put in a bunch of that. But that's maybe the only gripe I had with the movie, and that's not even like a major gripe, really. Like, just the performances. I mean, Denzel, obviously we've talked about, but Angela Bassett as his wife was fantastic. I mean, just seemed like basically everybody. I mean, the guy who played Baines, even though it was a created character, like, he was still very good, and just everything was just really good in this movie. I was for since I hadn't seen it, it was always one of those ones I felt like I should see, and I'm glad I have now seen it, especially not only just for its importance, but also just for the fact that it's a really damn good movie.
Agree on all points.
yeah.
Chewy.
I wanted to mention, there's nothing. I don't think there's anything in either of these movies. Maybe you guys can convince me otherwise. That matches the moment of the assassination, where he has the realization. Malcolm, as played by Denzel Washington, has the realization that it's happening, and he's been talking about this is potentially going to happen. And they played the song that had played in the kind of the montage before that was long time coming, and then he has this little smirk because he knows he's going to be essentially murdered for his cause, and he's okay with that. He's happy with that, and it was, yeah, that was pretty powerful. But
yeah, especially because and sort of peppered throughout the movie, there are like multiple points where people talk about how they're ready to die. You know, I think he said that he's ready to die for the prophet Elijah Muhammad at some point or multiple points, and then there was another person. It was the prophet Elijah Muhammad's brother who came to tell him when he told him that he was supposed to rig a car bomb to assassinate him, but he wouldn't do it. And Malcolm is talking to him, and he's like, you know, they'll kill you essentially for siding with me. And he's like, well, then I'll die then. You know, so there are a few different parts for that, and then yeah, that leading into that moment right there where he just knew, and then yeah, and then of course you hear all the screams from his wife and everyone else. It was a very powerful scene for sure.
I just wish you brought that section up, and that just made me. I feel like this movie, it could have explored some of that more. You know, what does it mean to devote your life essentially to what he, I think, perceives as a false prophet at that point? You know, he kind of wrestles with it, but again, so much of this we're trying to suss out what is going on in his head based on tics and facial movements and what he says, of course, to other people. But I just think there's a very interesting movie there, just in that. Again, I think we've talked about this before, but this whole cradle to the grave thing, which Spike didn't think he was doing, but he kind of did, I think, with this biopic. I feel like if he had just focused on a couple particular aspects of his life, it could have been a more interesting and effective movie. Whereas here we got a 3-hour long biopic. I know biopic is a movie, but I'm using, you know, movie as a very specific term here. You know, a cinematic joyride. Not that there's a lot of joy here, but well, I don't know. Do you guys? I don't know. You just got me thinking about that.
It was an interesting sort of change in how that, and they did grapple with it a little bit, like you said, and then because what was it, the Baines character was like, oh, you know, Noah was a drunk, but God gave him the ark and all this stuff, and gave him all these examples of people that were bad, essentially bad people from the Bible, but that God chose for one reason or another. And so, like, oh, the good deeds outweigh the sins, and all this sort of stuff, and just this. I actually wrote that down because um, it was just about, it was essentially like these good deeds. They're hiding all their infidelities behind these prophecies and these good works, and these good deeds are essentially indulgences, right, that allow them to do bad things, because the whole point was this prophet Elijah Muhammad was, you know, was running around with multiple women and had fathered multiple children, and then denied it from his, you know, women that worked for him that he had taken advantage of. And um you know, so it was just, they all just kind of washed it away, and they were just like, well, you know, he does so many other good things that it doesn't matter. And yeah, coming to grips with that had to be hard. And obviously, you know, we that was the scene, the meme scene, like that gif where he, you know, slams on the table and takes his glasses off, and you see that on Twitter or whatever when people's sports teams do bad, and it's been sort of immortalized in that sense now. But um you know, seeing the context of that, it wasn't nearly as funny as it is when it's just a little gif on social media or something. But yeah, I mean, that scene, they kind of dealt with it, but then after that it was just kind of
yeah.
like, oh, now this is the way it is now.
And when I'm thinking of like the medium of cinema, of film, would not would a 2-hour exploration of that, you know, expand on that notion and that scene and explore that more, would that not be uh would you rather see that as an audience goer than a 3-hour biopic? Not even of Malcolm X, but just in general.
that's essentially like the Selma angle, right? Because that's kind of
Yeah,
they approached it, right?
this is
Where
an
they
argument for
they
any
didn't
biopic
do
or the
yeah, they didn't
Napoleon
do
thing. Yeah, I mean,
beginning
we
to
talked
end
about
of
it last
Martin
year. Yeah,
Luther King's career, but just one major
yeah, you
event.
focus on one bit because it's too hard to do the
You can have
rest.
flashbacks here and there, that's fine. But yeah, like that would have been interesting. I don't know if it would have been better or worse, but it would have been more interesting, I think.
I think a modern movie that does this really well, probably my favorite biopic is Steve Jobs, where it has this very hardline three-act structure. It's these three distinct points in his life, but it keeps hitting these same themes, best symbolized by the fact that he keeps ending up talking to and interacting with these same people at these three distinct periods of his life. And that's why I think, and that was written by Aaron Sorkin, who obviously is going to be a little bit more unique in his approach, maybe. But I feel like we're moving more toward that, where I feel like people, and, Selma was more recent, obviously, where they think maybe it's just more powerful to explore this one moment or this, compilation of moments rather than try to do, again, Spike Lee can say what he wants. I think I don't want to say he's wrong, but like maybe he didn't intend at the time, but I mean I feel like he did a pretty standard like cradle to the grave biopic.
Yeah,
Like
we
that's
certainly got the coffin part, and we started
right.
it
So
is very early in
and
his
it
life.
has
So.
stuff, yeah, it starts really early in his life. I mean you see stuff from his childhood and then it spends a lot of time with him when he's a young man. So I don't know. And again, biopics are probably a little bit different then. This is the early 90s and they became maybe
I
a
was
little bit
gonna
more of a
say, I
common.
feel like I'm
Yeah.
punishing this for coming just too soon temporally.
Right, right. But we're living in a post, we had Walk the Line and Ray and all these musical biopics that we watch now. And so this one was before all those. So you're right. We're probably kind of punishing it. Maybe he didn't intend it that way, but now we see it more that way just because of time and everything that's happened in between.
Well, that's a good segue into Martin
There's another
Scorsese's
biopic,
Aviator.
another mid 2000s biopic.
Yep, another biopic here, and that it honestly, the Aviator is kind of toes that line between both of them there of these sort of cradle to grave, but then also focusing on just certain eras because you definitely see Howard Hughes as a kid and when he's really young, and then it goes through about a decade of his life, and then or more than a decade, 2 decades of his life, and but then it focuses on these certain points in those 2 decades more so than just like a year by year or anything like that. And there is also um I lost my train of thought here. I was gonna
Would you say it flew away? Ah,
nailed it.
oh,
Nailed it.
this is how
But
we get the young audience with the
there it
dad
is
joke
with
from the one
the
that's not even a dad.
fantastic knee slappers there by Steve. But anyway, with the Aviator, like another fantastic movie. Okay, and this we talked about where with Malcolm X, it's very talky because it has to be. Well, the Aviator has the advantage that it doesn't have to be very much. Now there is still a lot of talking. Don't get me wrong, but the there's a lot of it that's broken up with just these fantastic flight sequences that are made by Martin Scorsese. And this is, you know, we talked about how, or I mentioned how Spike Lee, Malcolm X seemed like the most epic movie for him. And, Martin Scorsese had kind of started at this point getting into a little bit more epic territory, if you will. Like Gangs of New York just came a couple years before this. So he'd had a little bit of that. But, his history was more of that sort of smaller type movies before this early 2000s era. The Mean Streets and the Goodfellas and stuff. But the Aviator, in terms of scope, I mean, it's just as big as any movie that he's done, if not bigger. And I mean, again, he pulls it off like you wouldn't think, or you wouldn't have thought at the time that, at least I didn't, because I remember when Aviator came out, I saw it in the theater, and I was like, I remember thinking like, okay, guy who directed Goodfellas, is this really going to be? I hadn't seen Gangs of New York at the time. I wasn't really interested in that. So I wasn't really sure what to expect. And it was my freshman year of college. A friend of mine who was from Kansas City, we were home and he was like, "Hey, me and my parents are going to go see a movie. Do you want to come with us?" And I was like, "Sure, why not?" And I didn't even know what movie they were seeing. And I was like, "Oh, by the way, what are we seeing?" And he said, "The Aviator." I was like, "Oh, okay." I didn't have a huge interest in seeing it, but like, I didn't know who Howard Hughes was, what he did, anything. And I wasn't sure how Martin Scorsese would be able to pull off a movie like this, or if he even could. Um, and I came in. The movie it's another long one, 2 hours and 50-minute runtime on this movie. And I remember it's one of the few movies. This is how you know a movie is good for myself personally, at least. It got to the end of the movie, literally the ending scene of the movie, and I was like, "Oh man, now it's really gonna get going." And then the movie ended, and I wanted more. Like I would have sat there for God knows how long and watched more of this movie because it's just such a fantastic. I went to the library when we got back to school. I went to the library at Truman State University, and I rented from the library a Howard Hughes biography after this, and then I ended up buying it myself just so I could have a copy. I can see it from here. Um, and my friends used to make fun of me and say I had a man crush on Howard Hughes because I was like, after this movie, this is one of those like life changing movies. I was just like, this is insane. This guy, everything that he did, and I watched documentaries and read all this stuff, and it's just um, it's incredible the life that he led, and the this movie absolutely does him just all the justice that he could ask for. And Leonardo DiCaprio, I mean, his performance in this movie, like I always thought it was good, but every time I see it, I'm just like, damn, I forget how damn good it was. You know, he won for The Revenant, but this is what he should have won for. I don't feel super bad because Jamie Foxx was incredible in Ray, and that's who won that year. So it's like that's really tough to be too upset about that because he was fantastic. But man, DiCaprio should have won for this movie. He was so good in this movie, and I mean, Cate Blanchett, she's one of my favorite actresses of all time. I love her. She did win for this movie. Um, I mean, everyone was pitch perfect casting, and just like John C. Riley, uh, freaking Alec Baldwin as Juan Tripp was great. Alan Alda as Senator Brewster is just fantastic. They all kill it. They all like they bounce off each other perfectly. I mean, there's very I don't even know that there's any aspect of this movie that I would personally change or that I could really say I have any sort of huge gripe with. I mean, if I really had to try, I'd maybe some of the stuff at the beginning maybe kind of moves and jumps around too fast. Uh if that, but I didn't think that it did, but maybe I could see that as a complaint or whatever. But I mean, just full disclosure, this for a long time before I hadn't seen Malcolm X before this week, but with The Aviator, it has been one of my favorite movies of all time, essentially since I've seen it. This is like my comfort movie. I would come home from going out at school and I would just put The Aviator on and watch it and fall asleep to it. Like I just love this movie so much. And Nate, I don't know if you're in quite the same boat, but pretty close to me. So I'll hear what you have to say, but then I'm also curious to see what Steve, because I don't think Steve's seen it before this week. So
So I will. I've been keeping this secret for most of the season. This is my favorite Martin Scorsese movie. I absolutely love this movie. It is also one of my favorite movies. I'm just going to run down my list because of all the things I think about this movie. This is a small thing, but it's vastly important. I think this is the best color corrected movie of all time. The how they did color correction and post on this movie is they used the exact same color correction techniques that were available at the time periods they're depicting. So toward the beginning of the movie, it's two strip Technicolor, which is why the green the greens and the blues almost kind of meld together in that aqua, like the peas on his plate when he's eating the steak. Almost kind of they have a very weird color to them. The reason they look like that is because they're color correcting the movie to the time that it took place, and as the movie goes on, the colors become a little bit more bold and you have more variation. Just
that's
that kind of
fascinating. I
detail.
did not know that.
Just that kind of detail is everywhere, all over the movie. I think this movie has the best insert shots of all time. I think it's maybe the best editing of any Scorsese movie. How they use these inserts with these flash bulbs that are going off, how it slowly starts to depict this obsessive compulsive disorder. Um, there's these quick, very fast moments like where he grunts and he stamps out something on the carpet, and it cuts to like this quarter of a second shot of his foot on the carpet, like squeezing into the carpet. Um, it's so perfectly edited, and how it just when he's like on the red carpet and there's like those brief shots of him stepping onto a flashbulb and then it would cut to like a really hard flashbulb. It's really disorienting to the audience, and it really puts you a little bit in his mind. I agree with you, Jeff. I think this is Leonardo DiCaprio's best film performance. The only other one that I would think he should have won Best Actor for this. He was not even nominated for Best Supporting Actor for Django Unchained, and I think that's probably his other best film performance. Those are his two best film performances. And I think the plane crash into Beverly Hills is probably, maybe this is my hot take of the week. I don't know how hot this take is. I think that might be the best sequence of Martin Scorsese's film career. That's
That's the
saying something.
in a callback to last season. That's the T-Rex breakout from Jurassic Park scene
Yeah,
of Martin Scorsese's
it's
career. Absolutely,
it
there's
is it is
perfectly.
absolutely
The
it
special
is
effects are amazing. It's a fantastic.
it's horrific in all
It's
the right
brutal.
ways.
Yeah.
It's the most, I mean, it has to be. I don't sit around, I've never been in a plane crash myself, and I don't sit around watching plane crash scenes from movies. It has to be one of the most accurate depictions of a plane crash that has ever been committed to film. It's awful and it's violent and it's scary and it's so, and it feels so real. Um, and then to he he does all these things, so symbolic too. He does all these things throughout his life. It's great screenwriting. All these things that he does throughout his life, and everything that he tries to be throughout his life. But what comes to him? Crawls out of this plane literally on fire, and a guy comes out and he stamps out the fire, and he's completely bloodied and broken. And as the moment before he probably thinks he's going to die, he grabs this guy and he says, "I'm Howard Hughes, the Aviator." And he calls himself the Aviator, and that's how they title the movie, because that's just what lived and breathed inside of him. God, I love this movie. I really love this
That
movie, and that sequence is just, it's so incredible, and
that
I
quote,
marvel at it every time.
if you remember when Facebook first was created, they had the wall, right? I think not when it first came
Oh
out, but like
yeah,
shortly after,
oh
when
yeah,
people
the
would put
wall.
up like their favorite quotes. I had that quote up on my Facebook wall. I am Howard Hughes,
Howard
the
Hughes, the Aviator. Um, so it's just it's fantastic. It's actually also this is kind of a weird thing to look at. It's mid 2000s, which is, CGI was coming along, but it was certainly still, not in the stages it was in now. It has a really good balance of CGI. There are sequences in this movie that are clearly CGI that I think if they were made today would maybe look a little bit better. But Martin Scorsese just does such a good job of balancing that CGI with, like, cutting into cockpit where you're actually with Leo, and they've clearly built that on a set. Um, and kind of going back and forth between those things. That's a lot of how that crash sequence is accomplished, by sort of combining those real world effects with CGI. And I think it's just masterful. So we we've both sung the praises of this movie. I'm curious to see what Steve thinks of The Aviator.
A couple things about it. I have seen it before. Nate, I think we saw this together on Christmas Day when it came out
This was a Christmas
in
Day movie, and I didn't remember if you saw it with. Yeah, I do recall
Yeah,
seeing this for the first time on Christmas Day. Yep.
this was one there in a stretch where we saw multiple Leonardo DiCaprio movies on Christmas Day together. Because what wasn't Catch Me If You Can? Was that anyway? Um, I don't have a whole lot to add from what you guys said. You've hit a lot of the highlights that I wanted to talk about. The reason that the CGI doesn't, you said the balance looks good is because he used a lot of scale models. Apparently, they saw the negative reaction to Pearl Harbor that came out, right before. and we're like, let's pump the brakes on the CGI, and so they went back and used a lot of not full size but big ass scale models. Like the Spruce Goose scale model was like had like a 25-foot wingspan. I mean, we're not talking like little tiny things, like gigantic models. And the color thing that was really cool. I noticed it, but I didn't have the training or the the understanding to know that what I was looking at as I was watching it. And then when I was researching for this movie after I rewatched it, I discovered that fact, and I put it in the outline, which Jeff, you would have known about had you read the outline for today's recording. But thankfully,
But then
Nate.
you wouldn't have my true and
Oh,
genuine surprise when Nate dropped that dime on us
that's
here.
true. That's true. But that's very cool. I think I won't keep you guys in suspense. Well, it doesn't matter anyway, since you guys are both obviously, I assume, going to vote the Aviator,
Well, I guess is that accurate, Nate? Are you
based on your rapturous praise.
Yeah. What's interesting about this week is that Malcolm X is clearly such an important movie, but I can't, and I've argued, I think pretty well for a lot of Spike Lee movies. I mean, I somehow beat Goodfellas with Do the Right Thing, so that was kind of a really big win for the season. At the end of the day, I don't want to be untruthful, and I want to speak to who I am. And Aviator really is one of my favorite movies of all time. I think it is a more accomplished film than Malcolm X, which Malcolm X that's nothing against Malcolm X, which is a brilliant piece of filmmaking. Um, I just think that, I mean, if we're talking about Martin Scorsese and we're talking about if we're talking about Scorsese and we're talking about maybe the greatest American film, I mean, people would argue he's maybe the greatest American filmmaker of all time. And I'm saying that guy, this sequence, this plane crash sequence is the best thing that he has ever done. That's going to be very hard for me to vote against. So, I mean, yeah, I am going to vote for The Aviator this week as much as I consider Malcolm X an important film. The Aviator is just such a perfect movie and I love so much of it. Um, so that's going to be my vote. But Steve, what were you saying? Yeah, that is correct. I will vote for The Aviator.
So the medium, and I was kind of getting at this when we were talking earlier. The medium is important, I think, in this. Like you said, Malcolm X is it's an important film. It's an important subject. It's an important thing. The I having seen it and seen what so many people, Spike Lee and the people that funded it. So because Warner Brothers, the production, they didn't want to fund it so much, he actually went out and cold called a bunch of famous Black Americans and got them to chip in money to help pay for this movie. And people wanted to see him live this, get this thing realized and see Malcolm X on screen so much that a whole bunch of famous people helped pay for the movie themselves out of their pocket. So seeing this movie and seeing what it took to get it off the ground and seeing the scope of it all really gave me an appreciation for what Malcolm X means to, or meant and still means, I guess, to the Black community and Black history in a way that just reading about it in a history book doesn't. So there's something to be said for that. And I worry that this is maybe just me being privileged, but I do think the medium matters. And I think the reason Spike Lee told the Malcolm X story as a movie is because Spike Lee makes movies. That's what he does. He's good at it. But he's a movie maker, so he's going to make a movie to tell this story. The reason The Aviator is a movie is because The Aviator, the story, could only be told as a movie. It is, for every part of it, can only be told as a film, as moving pictures. For everything you mentioned, from the editing, the way that they're using the editing to make you feel his OCD slowly increasing, the color to make you feel the appreciation of that, the history of, the cinematic history. It's, if we're boiling it down to its bare essence, what is a movie? It's moving pictures, right? Did Malcolm X use that medium, to its fullest to tell that story, or did The Aviator? And to me, it's The Aviator. And I came into this tonight and I was like, I don't really know which one I'm going to pick. But after thinking about it and hearing your guys' arguments and just sitting with it some more and just thinking about what it felt like to watch them, that's what I'm going with. The Aviator is a better movie. It's a better moving picture. So that's my vote.
Yeah, and I mean, no suspense here. Not that it matters anyway at this point, but yeah, I would go with the Aviator as well. And I think clearly Malcolm X, like we've all said, is a more important movie. And I think, generally speaking, if you have two movies that are relatively equal, all else equal, and one has a more important topic than the other, then I would probably lean towards the one with the more important topic. However, in this particular instance, just the sheer power of the filmmaking in The Aviator is just so good that I simply cannot vote against it. And it's not, like the it's definitely not as important as Malcolm X, but it's not that there's no important themes delved into either. Like mental health and all that sort of a thing is a really, like, the idea of somebody like Howard Hughes trying to deal with what he dealt with, and getting, like, I remember talking to my dad after seeing the movie, and he, because he remembered, he was telling me about how when Howard Hughes died, they had to the FBI actually had to get fingerprints to actually truly identify that it was his body, because his hair was grown out, his beard, his fingernails were super long, everything. Um, and he was like, if he lived today, he probably would have been fine. We have medication, we have psychological techniques, we have different things like that. That would have, I don't know if I say fine, but would have helped him to better manage his OCD and his mental issues. And so it's, that was a really interesting aspect of it as well, and pretty harrowing at scenes, like when when he pees in the bottle and he comes over and he puts it on the wall, and then you slowly pan back and you see all these bottles of piss. Like, it's gross, and it's like, it's harrowing. I mean, it's in your face, like, this is what this man's going through, and that is, it's essentially hell for this guy, and he has to try and hold it all together and everything, and just so many powerful scenes like that even just the sheer force of the filmmaking for The Aviator just can't be overcome, even by a movie as fantastic and as important as Malcolm X. So that'll do it for this week. Aviator knocks it down. So now that moves our tally one closer for Scorsese as we go towards our second to last week here. Spike Lee sitting at 6 weeks. He has been the victor, and Martin Scorsese now 5 with this week.
If we end up in a tie again, there's no one who's going to believe
No
that
one
we
is
are
going to
not
believe
rigging
this.
this. This is like a thing we have to say at the end of every episode. We are not rigging this. We are not trying to tie these filmmakers. We promise.
We even toyed with ways before the season on how to, like, maybe set up a way to tie, like, in a way, like, rank them beforehand and have Brandon schedule it so that it would tie, but not
Or so that it would
intentionally tie it.
at
Yeah,
least elongate the tension, because we weren't sure. Yeah, we were like, do we need to
not like
send
rig
in
our
all the
votes, but
votes
yeah,
ahead of
exactly.
time so that we can
Yeah,
order the episodes in a way that's
to
conducive
make it
to,
more
but
exciting for
we
you, the
did not
listener.
do that. And
My mom, the R1 listener. Hi,
what
Mom.
did she
I
do?
love you.
What did she say?
I'm just saying to make it more exciting for our listener, our sole listener.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. And next week is going to be one hell of a week again. Another banger week here. This
Yeah,
is
what is it?
uh, next week is our undercover week.
The opposite of stage.
The opposite of stage, with Martin Scorsese's The Departed and Spike Lee's Black Klansman. These are also, it's kind of slash our award-winning week. This was the first Academy Award that each won. Martin Scorsese won for Best Director for The Departed, and Spike Lee won for writing The Black Klansman, with Kevin Wilmot, who was a co-writer on that. Who, Nate, you have a bit of a
He was
relationship with him.
a teacher of mine at the University of Kansas, Rock Chalk. So I'll be I can
Currently
maybe
lives in
speak a lot
Lawrence
of,
as well.
yeah, I can speak to a little bit of personal experience that I've had with him as a teacher, and he's just a phenomenal teacher and a even better human being. He's a really cool guy. I think everyone was really happy for him. By the way, Jeff, I'm not going to go any further if we call the Departed anything other than the Departed with a drop
Departed.
R. That's the
Departed.
only way that it
When-
should be pronounced.
when this movie came out, we did that. We talked in Boston accents all the time, and so we got drunk and we were at a bar and we're just like talking in Boston accents the whole night. And then this one, I'm ordering a drink and I talk to this girl I know and she's like, "Oh, hey, how's it going?" And I'm talking this Boston accent. And she's like, why are you talking like that? And I was like, "Oh, it's in honor of the departed. And she's like, "Oh my God, who died?" And I was like, "Oh, no, it's okay. It's just a movie. It's just a movie."
Pull one out for Maddie.
Pull one out.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's gonna be, and I saw like the first part of Black Klansman, and then I was like, okay, I'm gonna stop this. And then I told Jackie I had to go pick Millie up or something, and I told Jackie, my wife, I was like, this is fantastic. This movie that I haven't finished it, and so she's like, she wanted to watch it as well. She's like, okay, I want to watch it together, and for whatever reason, we just never got around to it. And so this is one of the ones that she told me she wants to watch with me. So I'll be able to finish that this week, and from what I've seen, it's fantastic, and The Departed is also fantastic. So this is gonna be a tough week, and it could be the deciding week for Spike Lee. But The Departed is not only did The Departed Martin Scorsese win for best director, but The Departed won for best picture. And then of course, the talking about Spike Lee's contentious relationship with the Academy, Black Klansman lost to Green Book.
That's
I'm just gonna laugh out loud at that. Okay.
So upsetting.
It's similar to, I believe, was it Do the Right Thing that won or lost to Driving Miss Daisy?
That
Essentially
might
the opposite, or like the role reversed Green Book, right?
that's crazy. Green Book won that year. I thought that you could have been making that up, but no, you weren't.
Yeah, that's
okay. Well, we'll discuss next week because I have a lot to say about that.
Not great.
Because even though I love The Departed, I mean, just movies that we've talked about already, like I'm fine with Scorsese winning for The Departed because I think it is essentially deserved. But I think it's more deserved for some of the other movies that we've, between Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, and then of course The Aviator this week. So anyway, but that'll be kind of good that we can discuss that more in like our wrap up episode or kind of end of the season.
Yeah. And
episode.
If anyone is at this point still listening and has not watched the movies before these, Mom, I'm looking at you, Mom. Do not listen to the next episode without watching The Departed. Like,
yeah, big time.
We're gonna ruin The Departed for you.
We will ruin The Departed for you.
And you'll like it anyway. It's a good movie, obviously.
It's I know, and I still watch and like it. So, but if and then that's next week, and then we'll have one more week after that. But if Spike Lee wins next week, there'll be no final. If you remember from last season, we had a We Rest Our Case episode where Steve and I chose one of our favorite movies that we hadn't already discussed from the directors, and then sort of pitched our case for those being the deciding winners. And Nate and I have a couple movies that we'll bring to that, but it may not even come to it. So we'll see.
I still demand a recount from last season.
Oh, it's in the books. It's in the books, baby. Blame the losers, blame the refs.
These arbitrary rules that we've made, we can't go back and change them. So
that's right. That's right. Hey, we are nothing without our integrity.
Exactly.
It's true.
All right. So that's it. Next week, Undercover Week, The Departed, Black Klansman. Make sure you watch those movies. Steve's mom, watch The Departed.
And Black Klansman. Everyone listening, just go watch them. They're both just fantastic movies. They won awards.
They're both really good.
They're fantastic. So, yeah, we'll be talking about that next week. So until then, everyone, thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate it, especially you, Steve's mom. So thank you very much.
Keeping this recording or keeping our podcast going.
There you go. She's gonna take this and frame the recording up there since we've talked about her.
Put it on her fridge.
That's what my mom would do if she listened to Mom, listen to the podcast, please. Mom. I don't even think my mom knows how to listen to podcasts, but that's beside the point. So anyway,
if she learns now, she's gonna be mad now. She
That's
hears
true.
that.
She listens. She's not going to be very disappointed in me.
Do any of our wives listen? We could be talking about anything.
My wife doesn't know how to listen to podcasts. That's not true. She listens to podcasts.
My wife
She
does
listens.
not
She goes to
listen.
the website. She goes to the website and streams off the website to listen to podcasts.
Oh my gosh. Oh my god. Your wife is a Luddite though. She really is. But my wife talked a big game about listening. She started listening last season and then just, you know what? She just hasn't listened. So
My wife and I think the strength of my wife and I, if she can hear me through the walls of them recording, is we have very different interests and we both allow ourselves to be those individual people. So like my wife will not listen to this and like I'm okay with that. Like she has her interest and I have mine. Like she appreciates that I go and I do this thing an hour a week with you guys. So that's that's the. By the way, it is my wife and I's anniversary in 3 days. So happy anniversary, honey. That's the. I'll finish
Aw,
this with a nice
happy
thing I said about my wife.
anniversary.
Yeah.
anniversary. Look at that. That's fun times. All right. Well, that's it for this week. We will come back next week. The Departed, Black Klansman. We'll see you then. Until next time, thank you all so much for listening. We really appreciate it. We'll see you next week. And until then, thanks for stopping by.